And Bees, you brought up Tua, and that's the big name now. I know we're dancing around this Wilkins and Jerome Baker situation. Is Tua that guy? I'm not talking about. He led the NFL in passing yards. We know he can play football, but when you talk about a guy, a $50 million guy, you're talking about Josh Allen, you're talking about a Jalen Hurts, you're talking about Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, a Joe Burrow, who I can see them winning MVPs and Super Bowl MVPs. What, half of them have already won Super Bowl MVPs pretty much. Is Tua that guy that's not? I'm not saying he's going to get the money because it's what the market is. Is he that guy that has to get that money? Is he on that level of the names I just brought up?
Well, it's crazy because we don't know that answer. I don't think any of us know that answer. I don't think Mike McDaniel or Chris Grier know that answer, but they're kind of betting their careers that he is, right? When you make the decision, again, unless we don't know how this is going to play out, Channing, and perhaps they stick to a number that's middle class for quarterbacks, and middle class for starting quarterbacks now is $45 million plus. Let's say they dig their heels in and say, we're not going to pay you more than $45 million a year. Then that's kind of telling you, right? That's kind of them telling you that they don't believe he's in that top tier. But if they go to that top level, they're doing so on faith, and that's kind of scary, right? Like they believe that they've seen the trajectory Tua is on is going to continue to go in that direction, and that he's not going to plateau. And there are some that believe maybe he kind of plateaued in 2023, that the biggest difference between the year before and 2023 was staying healthy, and he didn't make a huge leap. He certainly made a big leap in year three. That no one can deny that. But kind of similar, between 2022 and 23. It's a big gamble, right? To give that guy, let's say they give him $140 million fully guaranteed, and they find out next year that he's the same guy, and there are 3 or 4 quarterbacks that he's just not going to get past in the AFC, which is kind of a possibility, right? Like it's possible. Those guys you mentioned, Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow, who, by the way, Joe Burrow was a non-factor this year. And this, again, as I said before, 2023 was really set up good for the Dolphins, and it was unfortunate they fell apart physically because, that may be the most talented team that they have going forward just because of all the cap things I'm talking about. So Burrow's going to be back. Lamar beat the hell out of them in Pittsburgh, in Baltimore. He's still going to be there. All of a sudden there's really good coaching in LA, and maybe Justin Herbert's better. I mean, there's a lot of things to worry about. Houston's an ascending team. Like, are you going to be able to get past all those guys with less talent? And again, the bet that they're making, fellas, is that Tua is going to continue to get so much better that he's going to make up for the lack of talent in other places. It's tough. It's a gamble. I don't know that they have the evidence that suggests he can do it, so they might kind of be taking a gamble here.
Really quick, just to follow up on Tua, then I know Solana has a more big picture question, but as it pertains to Tua, and you mentioned the cap going up, doesn't that context kind of change the math on comparing $50 million to Burrow or Hurts or whatever they got, because the cap is different now? So if Tua gets $52 million a year, like, it's not apples to apples when you compare it with those other contracts. Or am I misinterpreting how the cap the way that it should be?
Well, again, as I mentioned, it's up 13%. So let's say you think Daniel Jones got $40 million a year last year, give or take, right? So 13% more, that's $45 million, right? So that's a big jump. 13% of 45 is $50 million. I could see him coming around $50 million. Josh, for him to be, you take whatever Burrow, I think Burrow's the one that was the last one to get his last year. I get the math mixed up, but I think he is the highest paid quarterback right now. You're talking about $62 million in 2024 dollars. I don't think Tua is going to see that, but he still could see 50 to 55 plus, which is still an enormous chunk. That's a fifth of your salary cap. And so I don't think even if he doesn't reset the market but gets 50 plus, they're still putting him in a category of top 5 or 6, even adjusted for inflation, quarterbacks in the National Football League. Those 5 or 6, to Channing's point, have gone out and done things that Tua has not. The only one that I see that them totally betting on upside is Justin Herbert, right? He's the only one of those guys in that tax bracket that hasn't won MVPs, that hasn't won big time playoff games, that hasn't, really been clearly planting his flag as one of the best quarterbacks in the league. The only other kind of loopy quarterback deal there was Russell Wilson. We saw how that worked out. But beyond that, all those dudes that are in the top 5 are rock solid franchise, elite quarterbacks. And again, I think Tua is certainly in that second tier, but for them to put him into that top tier is them projecting he'll get there someday.
Bees, we don't have a lot of time, but just quickly, because you said last year, 2023 was their shot. When you go back to 2020, they did the tank. They won 5 games with Flores, and then they get Tua. They have the 3 first-round picks. I mean, to me, you have a 3 to 4 year window after you do a total rebuild like they did. And I know there was the coach turnover, and I know there's been a bunch of turnover in the coordinator positions as well. But I mean, we're going into year 4 now after that rebuild. Is this the final season where you could say, all right, this has to be it? There has to be some sort of postseason success for that to be considered, not a failure.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're even kind of selling the short a little bit. This is year 6. Like 2019 was 5 years ago. This is the 6th season of this rebuild. You're totally right. Like, you're absolutely right. If there isn't a home playoff game and a win and some noise in the playoffs this year, if it's just another one and done, or even, God forbid, a regression, because that's possible. All those teams I was going through, it's possible that they may get better and the Dolphins don't. Right? The Cleveland Browns seem like a team that, hey, maybe they could take a step forward this year. There are all kinds of teams out there that you might worry about being better beyond the Bills and the Chiefs and all them. Yeah, it absolutely will be a failure if they don't make noise this year, because unless they have a soft landing, right? Because there's one of 2 options they could take, and we don't know which ones they're going to take yet. They could completely load up this year, run up the credit card insanely, and then 2025 kind of blow it up. Or they could slowly kind of unload some of these big contracts for another swing up in 2025 and beyond. I would take option B, but we'll see what they do. If they totally load up and say 2024, we're going to have even more talent and have like negative cap space next year, and then they don't win, I think there will be some repercussions for sure.